All right, we are live. Shalom, everyone. Shag Simak, Pesach, all of our brothers and sisters in Yahuwah Almighty, Yahushua Messiah. And that Hebrew phrase means joyful, glad Passover. I hope everyone's having a joyful and glad Passover tonight. I know some Aki, some brothers and sisters are having they're probably already on first day of unleavened bread tonight. Some of you are already at the end of your week of unleavened bread. Possibly you're already past unleavened bread. So I hope everyone's having a great feast season. That's the important part. Again, um, you know, so we're going to kind of deal with tonight a introduction into this Passover study. Really, mainly, I wanted to go into um, the new covenant accounts of the past. Shag Simak, Pesach, all of our brothers, specifically the Passover that Yahusha took part in. And I know there's controversy about that too. You know, if we have time, Yahuwah willing, tomorrow night for our meeting tomorrow night, you know, for the High Shabbat, we could explain more of that, why we believe, we are to keep Passover on the 14th, not the 15th, and all that, and why we believe Yahusha did eat the Passover meal as what's famously called the institution of the Master's Supper or the Last Supper. So, anyway, but I think tonight we're mainly going to be focusing on Yahusha's a lot of like the crucifixion accounts here, a lot of the impalement accounts, and all of that, and also the resurrection and all of that. So anyway, um, so we're gonna start at Mark 14, and these guys are gonna be like selective scriptures. By the way, a lot of these cross references, we're not reading the whole chapter because we got a decent bit to go through. So I apologize to anyone that wanted to, go through chapter by chapter, but we're not going to be able to do that with time constraints and things like that. We're really trying to constrain this to Yahuwah willing, like, an hour to 2 hour study. Um, so here we go. Mark 14. Let's see here. So Mark 14 reads as follows. But after 2 days came the Passover and unleavened bread. Now, some people, this is controversial for because some people follow the Jewish tradition that Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread are one combined feast. That's not what the scripture shows us, whether in Tanakh or the bread. It's not one combined feast. Just because their Jewish tradition combined it into one feast doesn't make it one complete feast. Yahuwah, way back in Leviticus 23, says that the Feast of Unleavened Bread's a feast, and then you have the night of Passover. The day of Passover is a festival of its own. So we see that continued here in the book of Mark. It's separating the festival of unleavened bread from the festival of Pesach, Passover. Okay, and it says the chief priests and the scribes sought how they might take him by craftiness and put him to death. For they said, not on the feast, lest there be a tumult of the people. And by the way, the feast they're talking about, obviously, because it's one single day, they have to be talking about the Pesach. So they didn't want to have to take him on the Pesach. Okay. Now, a lot of people will say, well, see, this proves they were not having the Last Supper at the Pesach and this and that. They want to make strawman arguments like that. First of all, it's them craftily planning this arrest of Yahusha. It doesn't say that it actually happened like that. Obviously, we know later on that he was taken on the Passover, on the night of Passover. So obviously, what they planned to do didn't happen the way they wanted to plan it. They initially wanted to not take him on the Passover because there would be a riot among the people. So anyway, there's the context there. So anyway, um, let's see. Let me go back to the document here, see the next verse we are going to. Luke 22, verse 1. That's going to be the next one. Luke 22, 1. All right, so Luke 22, 1. But the feast of unleavened bread, which is called Passover, drew near. Now, let me explain what this means. The feast of unleavened bread, which is called Passover, drew near. So, what is this talking about? This is saying that the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is drawing near. Why do they combine the two? Traditionally, in their own rabbinical traditions, guys, they called the whole week Passover. Mm-hmm. That's all. That's all it's saying. Okay, this is why, because a lot of people tell me, oh, Doug, I don't want to have to research into all their little beliefs. This is why it's important to know their rabbinical beliefs, because scripture does mention certain things like this of the culture of the first century Yahudim and what they practiced as far as traditions wise. Okay, so you'll see things too like ritual washing. The Passover was near, so they had to ritually wash to be clean, because they believed that this was a outer expression of purifying themselves because they had to be ritually clean to keep the Passover. So there was traditions they added in that they believed would help them keep actual commandments that Yahuwah gave. So anyway, that's Luke 22, verse 1. And again, it's talking about in verse 2 there, the chief priests and the scribes sought how they might destroy him, for they feared the people. Okay. So again, we have a current theme here. So now we are at Matthew 26, 1 to 5. Okay. Mom, would you like to read that for us?
Sure.
I'll be right back, okay?
When Yahusha had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, as you know, the Pasach is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. Then the chief priests and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas. And they plotted to arrest Yahusha in some sly way and kill him, but not during the feast, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. I don't know how far Doug wanted me to go, so I'm gonna continue into the next section. While Yahusha was in Bethany, in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste, they asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. Aware of this, Yahusha said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. I tell you the truth. Whether this good news is preached, wherever this good news is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Interesting account. Matthew does a very thorough, I think, account of this. Doug and I were talking about this before, that I could be wrong, but I thought that when they were having this meal and this woman came and poured the nard on his head, that Judas was the one to say, why are you using this expensive nard when many poor people could have been taken care of or whatnot? I paraphrase. But as Doug reminded me, it wasn't just Jude. It was several of them. It doesn't really go into all the names, but it lets you know that plural, that there were a bunch of them saying that. I think they didn't fully understand. Truly, they knew he was their master. He knew that he was, Yahuwah incarnate. But I think there are things that they just, did not understand really until it came to that time where he was about to be given up as the lamb. He was going into detail about explaining about, you will not always have me with you, and the reasons, because they didn't seem to understand either. They didn't seem to fully understand, so that's basically what I wanted to say, is that um I believe they were learning all the way until the point in which, even after he was resurrected, because a lot of them didn't even believe that when Mary Magdalene had seen him. A lot of them were not willing to believe. They thought that she was telling a tale or having a dream or something. So it was really right up until he left to go back to the Father that they fully understood, about exactly who he was and what he was. And I don't
But
know.
Sharon, have you guys heard about how now people were idolizing this woman? And
Oh,
there is like a special day to like honor her.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. I
Yeah,
really don't doubt
crazy.
that one bit. Now, after reading this and saying how she will be remembered, I don't doubt that people would make a day for her and whatnot. Yeah, I have no trouble believing
The
that.
Catholic Church, I would say, definitely did.
Oh yeah.
I could
Oh yeah.
probably bet my bottom dollar they did.
Yeah.
Because they make a feast for everyone, so they're
Yeah, I know,
there's,
it's true. It's true. Yeah, I don't doubt that has been done. Even though they don't even know her name, you know,
Yeah,
even though they don't even know her name.
I heard about that last year
Mm.
where I don't even know if it was among us Torah keepers that they were saying that there was a day that they were honoring her because of course
Mhm.
they take everything out of context, and because the
Yes.
scripture says that she's going to be honored or remembered, there is a
Hmm.
day for this woman. It's so demonic.
Yep. I know this is a little off topic, but it kind of lines up. When uh Michael the archangel was being, confronted by Satan about the bones of of Moses. I honestly believe the reason why Yahuwah buried Moses himself and did not let anybody to this day know where his burial is, because they knew that his people would have made a shrine for him. They knew that they would have idolized Moses that way. So I believe that that's why Father buried him himself and wouldn't let anybody know where he is.
The
yeah.
But
same thing with Enoch. Same thing with
true,
Enoch.
true.
And actually, not his people did, but later on they did. When you look at the original, just to show people what I'm talking about, the original KJV 1611 preface. Look at this. There's tons of graven images on the title page.
Mm-hmm.
Show you what I'm talking about here. Okay. Even though this is not a statue, it's a supposed to be an autograph, not an autograph, but a depiction of what a Moses statue would look like.
Oh, okay.
So already people were doing that. By the time you get to the Renaissance age and the Middle Ages, they were already doing that. So what is interesting to note, though, if you look at the bird up here, that's supposed to be a dove. The dove, what's above the dove is actually like what they picture is this light shining from the clouds or heaven. It has the tetragrammaton. Let me see if I can try to. So people that say to us, "Oh, there's no proof that that's his name," show you right here. Hold on a second. See if I can find a decent. See if this one is it right here. Right here. There, you can kind of see it. Right up here, the modern Babylonian Hebrew with the, Yod He Uwe He above the dove. It's in a circle. It's in a circle and it has light shining around the cloud. And then it has the Babylonian Hebrew of YHWH. So people that want to say, oh, there's no proof that his name is not the Lord and that it's Yahuwah. It's right there in the King James preface of 1611. So it's right there. Okay, so, but anyway, but as far as what Sister Marissa was talking about, that actually happened anyway. It actually already happened, and or what my mom just brought up. It already happened anyway, centuries later, or 1,000 years later, thousands of years later, after the New Covenant scriptures were written and all that, that you had men trying to make, prophets into idols.
The truth is every patriarch somewhere on this earth has an idol. There's a statue of sculpture of David in Italy.
Yeah.
There's stuff all over the place of, because I don't know. I guess that's what people just.
Yahuwah knows that's the way humans are. That's why he said, you have not been shown an image on the mountain. When you go to the book of Deuteronomy, I think it's chapter 4, isn't it? Where he says, no image was shown you on the mountain.
Right.
Right. There's a reason for that. He's like, he knows if he was to show his image, they would start worshiping his image.
Yep.
So that's kind of the whole point of that.
That's why Satan wanted to dispute wanting his body.
That's right.
Yeah. Satan, I think, also wanted Masha's body because he knew Yahuwah had plans for Masha's body. I think there was also something about the end times referring to that Satan knew that if he could possess Moses's body, that he could try to prevent that from happening, because supposedly the majority of people I talk to, and even scholars that have looked into this, the opinion even of the early believers was that it was either going to be Moses and Elijah or Moses and Enoch were going to be the two witnesses. And so that's what the opinion of the first century believers were. So if that's true, Satan's like, I gotta do something about this. Same thing like why he wanted to corrupt the human genome and all that. He's like, all right, well, the seed of man, there's going to be a guy that's going to crush my head from the seed of man, from the seed of the woman. So anyway, but yep. So see, where are we now? So you read Matthew 26, 1-5. Okay, we're at John 11:55. John 11:55. Excuse me. John 11:55 here. But the Passover of the Yahudim was near, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover, that they might purify themselves. And again, I mentioned this. This is the concept of their ritual washing. They would wash themselves so that they were ritually, ceremoniously clean for the Passover. Because if once we get to Numbers 9, in part 2, Yahuwah willing, we're going to see how that tradition was really started, because the commandment was you could not come ritually unclean and keep the Passover, especially the priests. It's very clear, at least the priests had to do that, because they had to sacrifice the lambs and all that. So when they started keeping the Passover at the temple in Deuteronomy 16, that eventually happened, where all the priests had to be clean to be doing that service. Okay. John 12, 1-8. Yahusha, therefore, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Yahusha raised from the dead. They therefore made him a supper there, and Martha served, but Lazarus is one of those that reclined at the table with him. Then Miriam took a pound of ointment of pure nard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Yahusha, and wiped his feet with their hair, and the house was filled with perfume of ointment. But Yehuda Iscariot, one of his disciples that was about to deliver him up, says, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" But this he said, not because he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and having the bag, he carried what was thrown in. Yahusha therefore said, "Let her alone. She bought it that she might keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you have always with you, but me you have not always." So this shows that Yahusha knew Yehuda's thoughts, Judas's thoughts. He knew what was going on with him. And he's basically saying, you have me right now. You're not always going to have me. You're always going to have the poor to help. You're always going to have them. You're not always going to have me. So that was the whole concept with that. But we see also this chapter talks about this happened. This supper happened 6 days before the Passover. So, all right. Let's see. Baruch you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. John 13, 36-38. John 13, 36-38. Simon Kepha says to him, "Master, why or where do you go?" Yahushua answered, "Where I go, you cannot follow. You cannot follow me now, but you shall follow me hereafter." Kepha said to him, "Master, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Yahushua answered, "Will you lay down your life for me? Verily, verily, I say to you, the cock shall not crow till you have denied me 3 times. So this is about Yahushua's impending crucifixion, his impalement happening, and in the future. And he's warning Kepha, he's warning Simon that, listen, you're going to actually deny me. You wouldn't be able to lay you down your life for me because you are going to actually deny me 3 times. So yeah. And we have John 2:12-13. Could you read that, Mom? Yep, chapter 2, verses 12-13.
Okay, Yahusha clears the temple. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. When it was almost time for the Pesach, Yahusha went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. So as far as you want.
Yeah. Mainly, I wanted just to do 12 and 13,
Oh, okay.
just to show, like, this is an instance of where it's telling us that the Passover is near, and this whole situation happened with the Pharisees in the temple, close to the Passover. So this kind of gives us an idea, how close to it was. All right, so hold on a second, guys. Got to get something from the kitchen here. Mom, could you also read John 6 verse 4? Be right back.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. The Jewish Pesach feast was near. When Yahusha looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Was that it, honey?
Yeah.
4 to 6, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll be there in a second.
Yeah.
Let's get my coffee here. All right, so okay. Now, so it looks like we're actually going by these cross references a lot quicker than I expected. So we might actually be able to fit in the Abib 14 or 15 study that I did want to do as well. All right, so I think we're at now what, John 18, 28, and 39. So John 18, 28, and 39. So let me see here. So 1828, John 18:28. Then they led Yahusha from Caiaphas to Praetorium, and it was early in the morning, and they went not into the Praetorium that they might not be defiled, that they might eat the Passover. Now, this again, this is where people get confused and they say, "See, Doug, they must have ate on the 15th." No, okay. When did they take Yahusha? They took him in the night, right? This is talking about early in the morning.
Yes.
Now, depending on when they roasted the lamb, they might have not ate the Passover yet. That's one way to interpret it. You could say that maybe they didn't have enough time to eat the lamb yet. Another interpretation I heard that I'm not against is that the Pharisees, they kept the Passover on the 15th rather than the 14th. Either way, it does that this verse of itself cannot contradict that Yahushua and his disciples kept the Passover the previous evening. That's there. This verse is not contradicting that. It's saying that the priests, the Pharisees, the Sadducees have not eaten the Passover yet. It's not saying that Yahushua didn't. So that's one of the confusing things about these accounts, is trying to reconcile why it seems like The Pharisees are eating the Passover at a different time than Yahushua and his disciples did, and all that. You okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I believe it says the Passover of Yahuwah, not the Passover of the Pharisees, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I think the Pharisees, they already historically, since they already were doing the 15th, the majority of those that followed the traditions of men at that time, they were already keeping the Passover on the wrong day. And it seems like Yahushua and his disciples were the only ones keeping it on the 14th. And that's possibly why that verse is worded as such. Like they hadn't ate the Passover yet. So those that want to use that and say, well, we're supposed to eat it on the 15th, number one, you're ignoring Exodus 12 and the whole Tanakh and what we're commanded when we're commanded to eat the lamb, number one. Number two, it's talking about what the priests were doing, the Pharisees and them were doing. Because it clearly says, they led who? The Pharisees. They led him to the praetorium. They did not eat the Passover yet. It doesn't say that everyone didn't eat the Passover yet. It says these priests.
Right.
So you got to understand context too. Because I've seen a lot of people try to use this as an excuse for us to eat on the 15th rather than the 14th, the lamb. Okay. Pilate therefore came forth to them and said, what accusation do you bring against this man? They answered and said to him, this man had not done evil. We would not have delivered him to you. And then you have the whole discourse between Pilate and, the Pharisees. And supposedly they didn't want to appear before him because they would defile themselves being at the house of a Roman, yada, yada, yada. Because supposedly on the Passover, you can't go to a house of a Gentile. So you see like all this like rabbinical stuff documented in the Torah accounts. All this traditions of men they had. Okay. John 19:14. John 19:14 is the next one. And it was preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour, and he said to the Yahudim, behold your king. See, this is why I believe they had a different Passover. Because now John 19 is saying it's the preparation for their Passover.
Mm-hmm.
When Messiah and the disciples already had it the previous evening. So it's like, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
The Pharisees and the people probably kept a Abib 15 Passover rather than the Abib 14 that's commanded. So you have to understand too is usually when the majority is doing something, that's not usually the right thing to do. So just think about that too. So just because they're doing it doesn't make it right. Just because the majority of the people in the Pharisees and Sadducees are keeping it at the 15th doesn't mean it's right. And it was the preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. And he said to the Yahudim, behold your king. They therefore cried out, away with him, impale him. Pilate says to them, shall I impale your king? The chief priests answered, we have no king but Caesar. And we know the whole story here. If you read the chapter for yourself, this goes into the crucifixion account. Yahushua is, for our sins, gets whipped with the what's it called, Mom? The scourges, the what was that
The cats
thing? The prods, right?
Yeah.
He gets whipped with prods, and to almost to the point where a normal man would have died before even getting to the stake.
Definitely.
And then we see the guy that helps him with the stake. Guy helps him carry the stake. He goes to Golgotha, and then he dies for our sins. And reason we're not reading that whole account is because we got other scriptures to get into. So we're not really going to have much time tonight to go through every crucifixion account. We're just giving you verses to kind of give you an idea of what's the importance of Passover, why new covenant believers should be keeping Passover and all that. What is the importance of it? 1 Corinthians 5:7. This is a key one from Paul here. So for those that say that Paul was telling us not to keep these feasts, you might want to go to 1 Corinthians 5. So it says, cleanse out the old leaven, that you may be a fresh lump as you are unleavened. For our Passover also has been sacrificed for us, Messiah. So what's interesting, it's calling Yahusha their Passover. It's actually calling him that. So this goes back to what John the Immerser said, behold, the Lamb of Yahuwah takes away the sins of the world. So spiritually, Yahusha spiritually fulfills the Passover lamb. Hence why Paul is saying what he's saying. Now, I want to make it clear, spiritually, he fulfills it. Because some people have taken that too literal to the point where, they want Yahusha's death to fulfill every little thing about the Passover. And people get into this weird concept of like, he's got to fulfill everything and this and that. And how can he be our Passover and eat the Passover? Like, people get into these like weird conspiracy theories and all that, missing the point. He is allegorically our Passover lamb. He's not a literal lamb. He's not a literal lion either. Like, brothers and sisters, we need to understand allegorical language. It's not that hard to figure out, okay? It's allegorical. It's meant to be allegorical, not physical, okay? So anyway, sorry for that rabbit trail, but I've just seen so many people, saying that just to rationalize keeping it on the 15th instead of the 14th. Anyway. Whom having seized, he put in prison, delivering him to 4 tetrads of soldiers to guard him, intending after Passover to bring him out to the people. Now, if you have a King James, it will say Easter.
Yeah.
The King James Bible literally translated the Greek word Pascha for Easter. Now, people that want to defend in King James only as people, what they'll say is, well, Pascha does not only mean Passover. If you can show me anywhere else in the Greek Septuagint that uses that same word, or in the Greek New Testament that translates that exact word Pascha for Easter, I'll believe you. But the only time it's translated as that is one isolated time in Acts 12. That's the only time. Every other time it's Passover. So again, there's no proof for your rationalization that the King James Bible is the only inspired word of Yahuwah. So those that hold to that opinion, your Acts 12:4 is going to be a problem for you, and many other places. So anyway, Hebrews 11:28 is the last
Brother
one.
Doug, Pascua actually means Christmas in Spanish.
Huh.
Just so you know, because I remember. I mean, obviously, I'm Panamanian, but in Latin America, Pascua means Christmas.
That's weird.
Yeah, in Latin, it means Pascua. It means celebrating Christmas time.
Huh.
Wow.
Yeah. Interesting. So, yeah. Now, as far as the Greek word Pascha, see, this is what they're going to give you. They're going to give you nonsense like this. Greek for Passover. Just to show you guys what I'm talking about here as far as the Greek language is concerned. That Greek word Pascha is never used for Easter. Never. Passover means Easter. It is, wow, it's actually Aramaic. Interesting. So there's like, I guess there's a little bit of marriage with Aramaic and Greek in the New Testament. This is actually something I want to write down because this proves to me anyway that the New Testament has Aramaic origins then. So Pascha is actually an Aramaic word. It's interesting. Pascha is Aramaic for Passover. So just to show you guys proof of the fact that any person that's King James only that wants to use this word and say that it does mean Easter, here is a study from Indiana University, okay? So again, so literally there's tons of wikis here. You got orthodoxwiki.com, Pascha, transliteration of the Greek word, which itself is a transliteration of the Aramaic from the Hebrew Pasach. I mean, it's right there in front of your faces, guys. So anyone that's trying to lie to you, that's idolizing the King James Bible, that wants to say, "Oh no, it means Easter," just show them that. Just go to one of those sites, show them the truth. You can easily show them through a lexicon, a concordance, all that. So it's not that hard to prove that Pascha means Passover, not Easter. Okay. Hebrews 11:28. This is the last one we have for the new covenant accounts.
Just to mention, I was just reading like a little backtrack from 23 on down, or 22, I guess. No, 23, and it really gives you the full, the full thing. I just wanted to mention.
Okay. So
Okay, so
Hebrews.
I was wrong. It says the Spanish word for Easter, Pascua, which is usually capitalized, did not always refer to the Christian holy day commemorating the resurrection of Christ. The word predates Christianity and originally refers to a holy day of the ancient Hebrews. So Pascua in Spanish is Easter. I thought it was Christmas.
Yeah, I think it's actually supposed. What that article is admitting is that now it's considered Easter, but it originally is Passover. Because that article you just read from is saying that in ancient times, pre-Christian times, it was a Hebrew festival. The Hebrews never kept Easter. So what it's actually saying is originally Pascua was Passover. And then once you had the Christian era, they started using that word. And by the way, the idea that Pascha or Pascua equals Easter, that didn't happen until Constantine.
Yeah.
Because what Constantine did was he said, okay, the Pascha we're going to keep is not going to be the Hebrew Pascha. We're going to keep the Christian Pascha, which is Easter. So what's very subtle about that article is it's trying to claim that the etymology goes to Easter, but if you go, like Sister Marissa just read, if you go further into that article, it tells you the original meaning of it is Passover. So what happened was eventually the Christians stopped celebrating Passover. So Pascha, even though the word Pascha means Passover, they considered their Passover as Easter. And if you guys don't believe me, research it for yourself. You'll find it out. In 300 AD or 330 AD, 3rd century AD, Constantine outlawed all Hebrew festivals. And even today, when you tell a Christian, you talk to a Christian about Passover, some of them will even say, oh, well, Easter's our Passover.
Mm-hmm.
That will come out of their mouths. It's a doctrine of Constantine. Mm-hmm. It's a doctrine of the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church lies to people, tells them Pascha means Easter. It never meant Easter in any language. So you can go to like I showed you guys on the screen. The Greek word Pascha comes from the Aramaic, which means the same thing, which comes from Pasach, from the Hebrew. So all of it means the same thing. So the fact that when you get to Latin, the reason why the Latin that Sister Marissa brought up, the reason why they probably think it's Easter is because Constantine at some point told them, well, our Pascha is Easter. We don't celebrate their Passover. We have our own version. So they kind of like, I'm trying to think of another thing like they did. They changed Pentecost in Christianity. When Christianity eventually did their own Pentecost, it had nothing to do with counting the 50 days.
Right.
It had nothing to do with that, but they still called it Pentecost. So they started making their own feasts. And so to the Catholic, they would consider their Passover as Easter, even though it's not Passover. They would call it their Passover. So I think that's where the confusion and the etymology of the word comes from. But as far as scripture is concerned, you can go to a concordance. It's never called Easter, ever. I mean, there's so as far as what the Bible says, you never call Pasach Easter. That's not even the same word. So that the Easter you get from Astarte. And I can even show you guys proof of this here, going to an etymology dictionary here. just to show you guys proof of the English Easter, where that comes from. Easter etymology dictionary. So you go to like an Easter etymology, Old English Esther. What does that sound like? Okay, Esther. Then you got German, Ostern.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to the Anglo-Saxon. If you go all the way back to the Anglo-Saxon, it will actually say Astarte. Okay.
Right.
So you're telling me that's the same thing as Pascha? Yeah, I don't think so. The people in the Catholic Church would want you to believe that use the Latin language. They would want to misconstrue it and make you think that it's the same thing as Pascha. Let's see here. Easter, Estre. Even that sounds like Astarte. Astron. The name of the goddess. Okay, goddess worship, whose feast was celebrated in Eastermund Anglo-Saxon month, corresponding with April. Especially in the dawn, Anglo-Saxon Christians adopted. This is what the Latin language won't tell you. Her name was adopted for the Mass of Messiah's resurrections. You know what adopted means? It means it wasn't originally their word.
That's right. That's right.
By default, adopted means that they didn't really originally have it. So almost all neighboring languages are variant of Latin Pascha to name this holiday. See, the problem is that they didn't originally have the word Easter. That wasn't theirs to have originally. So by default, if it wasn't theirs to have, how can Easter equal Passover? It's not the same thing. That's why there's an old saying, guys, history is written by the victors. There's an old saying. So you're never going to get 100% truth when you only look at one language. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is, the reason Latin it means Easter is because the Latins worshipped Astarte. They worshipped her. They would want to adopt her name for Pascha to rationalize keeping her feast as the Messiah's resurrection day. Which, I mean, that, by the way, guys, that's a secular article. A secular etymology dictionary is telling you that they didn't originally have that name Easter. Okay, so meaning that the Messiah's resurrection day was not called Easter until a certain point. And by the way, Yahusha never, ever, ever said, celebrate the day of my resurrection. He never, ever said that.
That's right.
He never, ever said that. And I know there's some out there that will say we already have a resurrection day. We have first fruits. I would say yes and no. Depending on when he died during the week of Passover, he might have not resurrected on first fruits. So I'll give you an example, right? Just do a little bit of like charts on here, right? So if he died when I think he died, again, this is not doctrine. This is just, we're having a little fun here, right? If his 3 days and 3 nights are what I think it was, okay, you got Wednesday to Thursday 1, right? It's 1 full day, 24 hours. Okay. Thursday night into Friday night, 2 days, right? Then Friday into Saturday is 3 whole days. Now, so the Passover would have been on Wednesday night, started on Wednesday night. You have the first day of unleavened bread, which people call first fruits. If that's the case, he's still in the grave on first fruits, okay? On the first high day. He would not resurrect until the weekly Sabbath. So if that's the case, then we can't even say that's his literal physical day he resurrected on. I'm not saying it's wrong to I'm not saying it's wrong to celebrate and be like, have joyous thoughts of his resurrection. And if you wanted to think about his resurrection on the day of first fruits, I'm just letting you know there is a possibility he did not resurrect on that physical day. There is a possibility he resurrected on the weekly Sabbath, which is a day after first fruits. So even that, that's kind of man-made tradition that really doesn't have any proof, and all that. So The only way I could see him resurrecting on first fruits is if that Passover of that year was on a Thursday night. That's the only way that could happen. So, and again, if you believe that he resurrected on first fruits, I hate to say it, you would have to accept that he resurrected on the first day of the week then. So that's another thing too. If you believe he resurrected on first fruits, then you have to accept that he resurrected on a Sunday. Because if he doesn't resurrect on a Sunday, by default, he's not resurrected on first fruits. So that's the point I'm trying to make, is that we don't even know for sure. Because quite frankly, guys, we were not there in, what year would have been in Mom, 32 AD? We were not alive back then. How would we know exactly what day of the week he resurrected on? So again, that's besides the point. The point is, he never said, "Thou shalt celebrate the day of my resurrection." Mm-hmm. He never said that. He never, ever, ever, ever said that. He's still the wave offering, even if he didn't resurrect on that specific day. He spiritually fulfilled it. This is what we need to understand: spiritual fulfillment versus physical fulfillment. He doesn't have to resurrect on that specific day to fulfill first fruits, to fulfill the wave offering. He's still our wave offering to the Father in the Melchizedek priesthood. That doesn't change just because he's not resurrected specifically on that, on that day of first fruits. But if I'm not mistaken, Mom, right, isn't first fruits the 15th of Abib?
I'm not even sure if I need to.
Let's just go there real quick, because I want to kind of show people that. Okay, let's see here. When does Scripture define first fruits? Which day of the week of unleavened bread? Okay, so you got let's see here. So it says, Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, verse 10 of Leviticus 23 here, "Speak to the children of Yashar, you shall say to them, when you shall enter into the land in which I give you and reap the harvest of it, then you shall bring a sheaf, the first fruits of your harvest, to the priest. And he shall lift it up, the sheaf before Yahuwah, to be accepted for you on the day after the first day, the priest shall lift it up." So actually, according to the way the Septuagint reads it, first fruits would not be until the 16th. It's the day you lift the sheaf up. So actually, it would be the day after the high day would be first fruits. So I think where we get the idea, I don't really know where we get the idea that the first day of unleavened bread is the same day as first fruits, because according to the text here, it would be the day after the first day of unleavened bread. So that's 16th of Abib. That would be, so now that I see that it's the 16th of Abib, I have to take that back. Let me correct myself, guys. Now that it's the 16th of Abib, he could have resurrected physically on first fruits, because that's when I believe he would have resurrected. So so if you got Wednesday to Thursday, no, never mind. He would have, so you got 14, 15, yeah, he would have. So from what I have on my chart here written down on my notebook, it would have been actually the weekly Sabbath of that week. That was the 16th of Abib, from what I see here, Friday to Saturday. So that would have been Abib 16. So if he rose on the weekly Sabbath, it just so happenedly hit the Feast of First Fruits. Does that mean every year it's going to hit the Feast of First Fruits? No, because Yahuwah's calendar is not fixed. Okay, so but the point is that he fulfills the feast spiritually. The point is, Yahushua was always supposed to fulfill the feast spiritually and not necessarily physically. Okay, so when we start trying to put extra parameters on him, I think that's where we go into trouble. But again, I had to correct myself a couple of minutes ago that it seems like the day of first fruits, or what people call the Feast of First Fruits, is actually the 16th of Abib, not the 15th. So anyway, so I just wanted to clear that up. I wanted to correct myself there. Let me see here. I think we got a little bit of time tonight before we go off, because we might as well get into this just in case we don't have enough time tomorrow night. Here we go. So this is a short little study I have compiled here about, basically about the when we're supposed to be eating the lamb. So this is going to be not too long, guys, but I definitely wanted to, spend a little bit of time here. Okay, so all right, let me just fix this doc here. So let me just try to make the print a little bit bigger here. Okay. All right, so this study, now this is going to be part 2. So what I want to do here is I think I'm going to make a new live, guys. So stay tuned. We'll be back very shortly, but I'm going to make a new live and we're going to try to finish this study called